What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Life of Lee podcast. As always, this podcast is brought to you in association with Fab Activewear. If you work out, if you wear workout gear, if you want to look good while you're doing it, if you want to help the planet while you're doing it, if you want to support me, and if you want to support this podcast while you're doing it, please head over to fabactivewear.com. And if you use my code, LifeOfLee10, you'll get 10% discount, which makes everybody happy. Now, this is episode 22 of the Life of Lee podcast, and it is a exceptionally special episode because it is our first guest, and it is a very special guest. This guy is a rock star in the science world, and he is a scientist when it comes to music. He has qualifications in engineering and music. He has a degree in genetics and a PhD in molecular biology. Our guest today is Dr. Gary Yates. Dr. Yates, how you doing? How are you? It's good to have you on the show.
Hey Lee, how's it going? Thanks, it's good to be here. I'm a big fan of the podcast. It's good to see it grow over the 20 episodes. It's a good job you're doing. I think you should keep it up for sure.
Thanks very much, mate. It's I spoke to you before I started it, and it's something I've wanted to do for a long, long time, and to actually do it and put it out there and to get some of the feedback that I've got, and you know, it's been invaluable, and every episode that I put out, I'm so happy that I've continued doing it, and now we've reached episode 22, and I get to have yourself on as a guest, and we get to delve into those big topics that we discuss so regularly. So, for the people at home, Gary, could you just explain a little bit about yourself, your qualifications, how you got into science, and what it is you actually do on a day-to-day kind of basis?
Yeah, so I guess let's go in reverse order. So I currently work at the University of York as a postdoctoral researcher. I came there from Durham, where I gained a PhD in molecular biology, and from there I came from Glasgow University, where I got a degree in genetics, and basically that's all that's really relevant right now. I was a professional musician before that for a bit, and found that a little bit difficult to sustain a living from, so there was a crossover between what I loved and then, you know, doing something for work which I otherwise loved doing, and I didn't also enjoy that aspect of it. So
one thing I'd just like to make clear to the people at home, because this is one of the things that fascinates me the most about you. You are an incredibly competent musician. You could go out tomorrow and, you know, make money from being a musician, be it in a wedding band or something like that. You could go and do that, but you decided to get a backup plan in place before you really pursued the music, and that was science. Am I right? Like, science is still your backup plan. You know, you went and got a doctorate and a degree just to make sure that you had something to fall back on. You know what I mean? Like, me pursuing like acting, my backup plan is stocking shelves at a supermarket, you know. So for you to have such a big and all-consuming backup plan, and to dedicate yourself to it, it is one of the most inspiring things that I think I've taken from you. And yeah, sorry to interrupt there.
Thanks very much. No, that's all right. It's just day by day, man, and partly it's just interest, you know. Mm-hmm. Like, the more I went into science, the more I found it fascinating. Just to a certain point, and then you get you end up stuck down a little bit of a rabbit hole in terms of your research, because it's so detailed and so time consuming and expensive that you can't tend not to have big broad projects. Mm-hmm. You know, it's much more specific into different things. But because of that, I also have a general wider interest in science. Like, I follow. It's casual, but I obviously have a competence enough to understand it, and but in physics and astronomy and different things like that, I find myself being pulled in that direction very often. Right. And even like sometimes maths, and things like that. Sometimes I find myself going down little rabbit holes where something just intrigues me or interests me. And that's the same with music. To bring it full circle, is after I'd stopped pursuing music as a way of making a living. Mm-hmm. I started, it's been a long process, different things have happened, but generally what's happened is I've just started to enjoy it more and more and more again. And, that's brought me to where I'm at now, where I'm almost completing an album, which I've done an album before and I was not happy with it at all. So I don't really count it. So this one is like something I'm actually proud of. So that's quite exciting, you know. But yeah, so that brings me up to date. So now I'm active as a musician because I record at home and stuff like that, and I've had a few bands over the years. Currently sitting with nothing partly because of lockdown as well, and that also explains this werewolf look that I'm harbouring right now.
Quarantine cut.
Yeah. So yeah, that's me. I don't want to, ramble on about myself too much.
I'll take it back to you just for a second. Like right now, to me, you look like a meaner version of Terence McKenna. You look like if they were making an action movie of Terence McKenna, you would be the guy that would play him. Through the jungles, rescuing mushrooms and that kind of stuff. So what led you from music to science? Like I know you were quite a mature student. Like it was your mid-20s. You decided to go back to academia and to pursue what were you pursuing initially? Is why you got into science what you are doing now, or has that changed along the way?
Well, there was a few things like probably prior to that I had stumbled around a little bit. The music thing had kind of died away. I'd kind of like it wasn't like I stopped being a musician and now I'm being a scientist. There was a transition period in the middle where I was kind of doing it, a little bit of it, and I was getting my interest in general in science was getting greater, but there was a couple of key things that happened in my life around about a year or 18 months prior to that, which we might get into another time. But it was so profound and life changing that it led me to explore. It made me realise that I could do things as well. That like these kind of ideas that may seem like a fantasy, to people right now. It's like, well, why don't you just chase it down and then see what happens? Yeah. And it gave me the freedom, to just think like that and just go after it. Just be like, well, why not? Mm-hmm. Let's see what, because it was funny because it was like, let's see where I tap out. Yeah. Let's think, can I keep how far can I keep up with them? Mm-hmm. That was kind of my mentality going into it. But the interest. Sorry.
I was just going to say it's the same approach I take to everything. Like when I got into acting, freerunning, podcasting, it was all just to see if I could do the thing, and if I could do the thing, what that would lead to. Because there's a lot of things I've tried that just failed, But there's other things that I tried and just kept pursuing, and like you say, it's just seeing how long you can go before you tap, or before you get knocked out, or before it's so it's the same kind of attitude towards what we're pursuing, but obviously completely different things that we are pursuing.
Yeah, that's interesting idea, because even like with music, what I'm doing right now is like I'm chasing down this very specific, I guess, like vibe and sound. It's like this big, simple, like basis. Like the full album is almost the same 3 chords all the way through. But therein lies the art, right? Because you're trying to make the same thing be different enough that it's still interesting. And I mean I used to practice for years, just holding a static chord and then coming up with a verse, bridge, and melody. Mm-hmm. Just one chord, same rhythm all the way, and it's so much harder than having things move under you. Like the creativity is really challenged at that end, and I think I used to do it for fun, but thinking back on it now, it was all just practice. It was good. It was a good way of like exploring different ideas, and I'm not trying to like break the mold. I'm not trying to like come up with these super different like melodic ideas. It's just like but there is loads in there. Like you can convert chords and do different substitutions, and basically every song's the same. Yeah. Especially in pop. Like more or less. There's obviously some exceptions to that, but yeah. But anyway, like, in terms of like the mindset, and that's also like somewhat how I view science. I like to take like. There is fact in science, obviously, but there is a lot of also best guess.
Yeah, there's a lot of wiggle room.
And I find that's one of the things, like, especially the kind of celebrity scientists, I have real problems with some of them, like Neil deGrasse Tyson, for example. You know, he always spouts things like absolutes, and he's very dismissive of ideas that don't fall into his regimented way of understanding physics. But a lot of what that's based on is theoretical, or at best, it's like, you know, the current model. You know, it's just extrapolation of data, and it's then modelled in you know, in some kind of like mathematical processing, like to get an answer and go, oh yeah, that's our best guess.
Yeah.
Like the formation of planets, for example, he'll tell you this is how a planet's formed, but that the best guess, the current model has changed at least twice, maybe 3 times since I've been paying attention. You know, so like, so that this is, again, there's always this thing, like being in academia, you have this constant narrative of, oh, we need to communicate science better. There's always like this problem with public engagement, and they don't get it, and blah blah blah. And it's the way it's portrayed in my eyes. It's you could easily simplify the language and discuss it. You know, you sometimes when we're discussing it in the lab between colleagues, we're using a much more simplified version of how we would write it up. You know, it's just like just casual. It's just conversational, and that's how you should talk to the public about it. It doesn't. You don't need to bamboozle them with, you know, big words and different things that.
Well, I've noticed a lot of things when we've been discussing more complex scientific theories or whatever, if you've said something that I don't particularly understand, you always seem to have a metaphor or some way to relate it to me that still imposes the science but removes it from the dogma of the science and makes it like, okay, so this does this, does this. I didn't understand that. And you're like, well, if you imagine, you know, you had this and then this came along, I'm like, oh, right, cool, I get it. So there is always, you know, like some people are just baffled by science in general. And I know you've had this before. People are like, oh, you're a scientist. Oh, you must do shit that I just can't figure out. But, you know, a lot of it's just people don't have a basis for understanding it. And as soon as it's explained to them
it's also... Sorry to interrupt you. It's also the decluttering of the language, like I said, because like the concept. If I describe a biological system, right? If I explain it as a concept, then it's much easier for you to uptake that information than it would be if I had to use all the fancy names for every molecule or protein involved. Yeah. You know, because and again, when I was learning and studying, I found that just superficial. If I understand the mechanism and the concept, then I understand how it works. Like being able to rhyme off every component involved, that for me, there's not much to that, because you can always just Google that, but you can't necessarily Google the concept. But you probably could nowadays. But do you know what I mean? It's like once it's instilled in your head, you can apply it to other things if it fits. You know, but just knowing this is connected to this, and that goes into that and converts this to this. It's great, but it's not really giving you much. Do you know what I mean, in terms of like beyond what you're dealing with there? Yeah. So science for me has always been a little bit of, you know, you take a little bit of something you learn here and you find somewhere else it also applies. Right. You know, and that's really interesting. Like one of the things that got me super hooked in science to begin with was at the cellular level, this like idea that all bacterial cells, or most bacterial cells, have these like little antennae things they call flagella or cilia. We have them in our digestive tract to push food along as well. Right. And how they work in bacteria is like a little like molecular rotor engine. You know, like this little thing, protons go across and it turns like this mechanism and the thing spins. Yeah, exactly. Right. Biomechanical. As soon as I seen a video of that and it was explained to me, I was just like, you know, I was in.
And then you want to know more.
And again,
from finding out more about that, it leads you to other things that you don't understand and you want to know more, and that's science right there. That's the method.
So now my work involves like partially like the carbon cycle and photosynthesis. So I work on how to enhance or decluttering how to enhance photosynthesis, you know, to try and make basically better crops eventually. Right. But we're doing this on an algae which can basically supercharge photosynthesis through concentrating carbon around it. And without giving you too much of the detail, you understand the concept of supercharging something, right? So again, I don't need to give you any details and you get the concept. This algae supercharges photosynthesis, so it's a high output. A photosynthesis product is some kind of sugar, so it produces way more sugar.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Like, so
And this,
you could look at it like that.
what you're doing in the algae, will that then be able to be applicable to other plants and like?
Absolutely, that's the point.
Right.
That is the point. We're working on a really simplified system. It's really not. I mean, it's super complex, obviously, but in terms of it's single cellular, so it's regarded as a simpler life form, you know. But yeah, it's super interesting. And that species, you have two examples of endosymbiosis, which is like one life form engulfing another life form, and then that life form existing within it. So these algal cells have a chloroplast and a mitochondria, which are basically potentially were free living themselves at one point.
Right. But now they've combined to make something else.
Well, no, they've been engulfed by this other type of cell.
Right.
You know, this is like, so it's in the lineage. Plant cells are in the lineage basically of like higher cells as a way, and then the bacteria is kind of you could think of as lower, you know, forms. But yeah, don't want to get too detailed. Don't want to get too into these things right now.
In terms of the science that you're doing, how cutting edge is it? Is it like, is what you're working on exclusive to you, or is there teams around the world working on this and you're collaborating, or?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a mixture of all of that,
Right.
because you have overlap. You're all working towards a common. Like, we're in a community where we're all working towards a common goal, but we've segmented it up.
Right.
You know, so you work on this part, and I work on this part, and so on. But in terms of how cutting edge it is, I mean, like, probably anybody doing science currently at an institution or university is cutting edge. You know, like, you're not getting money to go over old stuff.
Yeah.
You know. And that's what it's all about, unfortunately, is bringing in funding for the research. It's a big part of the job, and it's a big part of what determines what gets done, you know. And it's funny because with this COVID situation, you know, probably the aim is going to change a bit, I would imagine. I think there'll be more emphasis put on, you know, that kind of, and rightly so.
With, like, taking a more philosophical point of view, like, I know there's some scientists, famous ones, I can't think of names now, but they've said that their studies have proven to them an existence of a creator, and then other scientists see it purely as, you know, a mathematical construct. You know, everything will relate to each other in terms of formula and ratios and that kind of stuff. Do you see it as a formulating system of, like, order out of chaos kind of thing, or do you feel there is some overreaching creator? Or, you know, has the deeper you've delved into science, has it changed any of your preconceived notions about just the world around us, existence in itself?
Yes, it has. To answer the broader question, first of all, like, I'm open to all of those ideas. I'm open to all of those ideas being real.
Right.
And as much as that contradicts itself, I think the level of understanding that requires, probably as a species, we're not there yet. Do you know what I mean? So we can't really comprehend two things being the same thing but being polar opposites, but they could be, you know. But to dive into the science, I actually went. So I don't really believe in a creator as such. I don't think. I never have. But as I went deeper into science and, like, seeing almost how perfect everything was, I mean, the level of detail and the level of organisation, and that's that. Like, in biology, we're still discovering layers of organisation in between the layers we already know. It used, at one point, we thought it was just DNA, RNA, and proteins that regulated everything, but there's a whole suite of different things in between, you know, and, like, the list just keeps getting larger and larger, and that's really fascinating, because that means that we don't know where the end of that is. You know, and that's another thing in science that I find I'm attracted to, is that when we don't know the limits, or the things that we cannot measure, you know, the metaphysical, you know, things like that, that's really intriguing, because you've first of all got to try and solve a problem of, well, how could it be measured? But then you've also got the pondering of, what could this mean, or what could it be, or
Yeah.
and that line of thought above, you know, rigidity in science is really a problem. People not being open to new ideas, and I say just open yourself to every idea
Yeah.
until it's dismissed. Then it doesn't do no harm, surely,
Yeah.
to be open to these ideas.
I agree in terms of what Nikola Tesla said when he said something along the lines of when the science world, when science starts investigating the metaphysical world, as long as the physical will make more progress in 10 years than we have in the last 10,000 or something along those lines. And I do believe that psychedelics, the world is definitely going through a psychedelic revolution at this moment, and I feel the more that insinuates itself into different branches of science and art, more engineers that do psychedelics, the stuff that they're going to bring back in the buildings they're going to be able to create, the machines, the more scientists take psychedelics, and it opens up, like you're saying, opens their mind up to every idea. And the more it's researched into it, and the more stigmas are broken, because how, I don't know if it's a widely broached subject, but I mean, we know that there's a massive community of microdosing going on in Silicon Valley and that kind of stuff. Is there any psychedelic leanings in science that you've came across so far? And do you think, is there any people that you've looked at who are doing great work, but you feel like, oh, if he had a mushroom trip, that would open his mind up and his work would go so far this way or whatever? Do you think psychedelics are needed to usher in a new wave of understanding, or do you believe they could usher in a new wave of understanding and a new way of looking at the world?
Yes, potentially. To say it in one word. But I mean, it's multifaceted as well, and I think in terms of research that's being done, like the treatment of mental health issues, that seems to be overwhelming, just overwhelmingly positive. And then you get similar things when you looked at what was the issue we had in the UK with, I think it was some kind of cannabis extract being used to treat to treat epilepsy.
CBD or?
I don't know. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. It was some extract for cannabis plant, anyway. It's an oil, and it was being used apparently really successfully to treat epilepsy. And there was people being
stopping seizures,
denied it because.
Oh yeah, getting denied it.
But anyways, so the point is, a lot of these, what was once regarded as recreational drugs, are probably much more beneficial than pharmaceuticals. And I think if you can find an answer in nature, then it's probably going to be better for you than something that's been manipulated and
pharmaceutically
made to
processed
yeah. Because I'm not that I'm completely against pharmaceuticals, obviously, and I understand the science of it. So it's an art form in itself, and some of the work that those companies have done is helped pave the way for other research and other important breakthroughs, obviously. And some of the treatments are brilliant. You can't write off that entire industry based on what I'm saying, obviously. But the point I'm trying to make is, if you don't have to make a drug for it because there's one already in nature that fixes it, then don't make a drug for it. Do you know what I mean? Why would you?
Even in terms of a lot of people, when you talk about plant medicines, ayahuasca and iboga and that kind of stuff, especially ayahuasca, the effects people have from just freebasing DMT is remarkably different from the effects of ayahuasca, and a lot of people believe it's because it's coming from the plant. You've not just extracted the molecule, you've still got the essence, the spirit of the plant medicine. And I think that's much the same. If someone could give me a psilocybin pill, I don't think I would take it. I would much prefer to sit and eat 5 grams of the mushroom, you know what I mean, as opposed to someone going in, extracting psilocybin, putting it in a nice little capsule, that kind of thing. Because I do believe if it remains in its its natural form, it has more benefits. The same, it's better to eat vegetables than to take multivitamins, you know.
Yeah, but I mean, it's because I mean one of the most it's because the active ingredient isn't the only one probably
Yeah,
affecting the
yeah,
body. You know, or the recognized active ingredient, because you know, even like in cannabis, there's several active several active ingredients in
yeah.
that. So when people take an ayahuasca, there's probably a profound suite of chemicals, because this is another thing. There's somebody a colleague of mine is working on one of the molecules he works on is catnip,
Right.
and so this belongs to a whole suite of proteins that have been undiscovered, or chemicals that have been undiscovered so far, that exist in different forms in plants, and they all have really interesting and unique chemistry, and a lot of them have really good potential for being treatments for different things. You know, so I remember growing up and hearing a lot of things like, when there was the big issues when I was growing up in terms of environment was the ozone, the hole in the ozone, and the destruction of the Amazon. And one of the things that came along with the destruction of the Amazon thing was they're probably wiping out the cure of cancer, because within that, you know, that amount of diversity
Yeah.
in plant species, you probably have a plant that will do, you know, everything that, you know, can fix every disease, basically, was the implication. And maybe just because I heard that so young, but I sometimes still think that might be true.
Right.
That there, you know, if you extract the right thing from, because just even go a walk down the woods and anywhere, you know, the diversity in species is amazing. You know, weeds, trees, moss, fungus, like everything. It's like insects. It's just, there's tons of things. Talking about just the plants and the green things, I mean, you could spend a day counting.
Yeah.
You know, just keep walking, and you'll just keep seeing different things, and that's the beauty of it. Is all these things been tested? Have you checked your local trees for DMT content? You know what I mean?
Well,
Like,
it's not even that. It's, I mean, the amount of plants that we have, and each of them might have something, like you say, might have a cure for cancer. But then, if you take all the plants and there's 100,000, just say, I mean, that's lowballing, you know. But you then need to combine each and every one of them with each and every, and then you then need to combine each part of each one with each other one,
wow, yeah,
you know, because like the ayahuasca brew, that's like the ayahuasca vine, and then you've got the IMO inhibitor, and when the tribes were asked how they knew that it was the root of that plant and the leaf of that plant that had to come together and be brewed, otherwise the two things independently wouldn't work, and they said it was the plants that told them. So, you know, and that's out of like hundreds of thousands of species, and then you've got roots of them, you've got leaves of them, there's so many, like almost
yeah.
an infinite. I mean, it isn't infinite. There must be a set number, but
But like, in terms of combinations,
yeah,
yeah. If you even limit it to 100,000 species, and then if you imagine each combination of one,
yeah.
and you don't limit the amount of combinations you can do, yeah, then you're quickly in numbers that could not be done.
And then you don't know. It might
Do you know what I
be
mean?
1 milligram of this compared to 500 milligrams of that, and if you get that ratio wrong,
Yeah,
it cancels itself out, and so I do believe, like, I mean, it's been said before, like, for every illness there's a plant that can cure it, and that's probably the more
Yeah.
Eastern philosophy towards medicine. But I mean, the simple fact that, like, psilocybin mushrooms grow wild in abundance, and they're just waiting there. We know that other mushrooms are edible. We know, like, psytropic, no, nootropic mushrooms can help with, like, cognitive ability and that kind of shit. And then you find a psilocybin mushroom, and you take that, and it's like an instant download of universal fucking consciousness. Do you know what I mean? So if there's a tiny little mushroom that can impose that kind of change on your consciousness, then I'm pretty sure there might be another plant or mushroom or spore or whatever, and you ingest that, and it will just remove tumors from your body. It will just attack them and attach itself and remove them or something. I don't know the mechanics, but just the world we live in is so
Yeah,
vast
I
and
mean,
diverse that it must be possible to live just purely with nature. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much agree with that. Like, I think there's just so much still to be discovered, you
Yeah.
know, and unfortunately, not everything is being looked at either. That's the other problem, and it might take us I don't know how many generations to get there, you know, and then you've spent all this money and all these teams of people trying to develop drugs to do things, but it was actually sitting there all the
Yeah.
time. All you had to do was take the root of this tree and the leaf of that tree, as you say, you know, and Bob's your uncle. Like,
And even what you're saying with
yeah,
things
so
not getting looked at, I mean, like DMT has been a class 1 scheduled substance for I don't know how long. There's been decades of research that haven't been happening on this, and now with like the Imperial Institute in London and that kind of stuff, there is scientific processes to understand this stuff, but I feel we're 40, 50, 60 years behind where we should be, and that's the reason for this podcast. It's to introduce my experience of psychedelics to a wider audience, so hopefully they'll go out and have their own experiences, because the more artists we have, the more scientists, the more mechanics, the more fucking engineers, the more politicians, you know. Like I seen at one of the Black Lives Matter riots or protests, two very different words there was a guy holding a banner that said cops need to do ayahuasca, and I'm like, yeah, 100%, that should be a prerequisite, you know, for being a police officer. You must go through a psychedelic experience so you understand that we're all one, we're all part of the same consciousness, so you're not going to start fucking shooting people because they're 4 shades darker than you are, you know what I mean? But yeah, Gary, we've got so much to say, but unfortunately we've just crossed the half-hour mark there.
no worries.
But it's been great having you on. I'm sure I'll have you on again, and we can dive further into fucking so many different conversations and topics.
Yeah, absolutely. Just hit me up. It's been a pleasure. I'm more than happy to come back on and discuss whatever you
That's
like. If I
outstanding.
can enlighten you in any way, I'll do my best. But, no
And
promises.
for any viewers at home, Gary does have some music up on YouTube. If you search Gary Yates, what song title would lead him there?
I mean, that's my B tracks. I'm not too.
Yeah, this is just to give
just,
you a little taste, because he does have an album coming out very soon, and I will promote that through the website because it deals with. I'll promote that through the podcast, sorry, because it deals with a lot of the things that we discuss. But yeah, Dr. Gary Yates, first guest on the Life of Lee podcast. Thank you very much. We'll wrap that episode up there. You guys at home, thanks for watching. As always, I'll throw up one of them, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take it easy.
Cheers, Lee.
See you later.
Thanks.